Nobody's Boy, Chapter 29. In Prison. Spring came slowly, but at last the day arrived for the family to leave London. The caravans had been repainted and were loaded with merchandise. There were materials, hats, shawls, handkerchiefs, sweaters, underwear, earrings, razors, soap, powders, cream, everything that one could imagine. The caravans were full. The horses bought where and how I did not know, but we saw them come and everything was then ready for the departure. We did not know if we were to stay with the old grandfather or go with the family, but my father, finding that we made good money playing, told us the night before that we should go on the road with him and play our music. "Let us go back to France," urged Mattia. "Here's a good chance now. Why not travel through England?" "Because I tell you, something's going to happen if we stay here, and besides we might find Mrs. Milligan and Arthur in France. If he had been ill, she will be sure to take him on their barge. Now the summer is coming." I told him that I must stay. The same day we started, I saw in the afternoon how they sold the things that cost so little. We arrived at a large village and the caravans were drawn up on the public square. One of the sides was lowered and the goods displayed temptingly for the purchasers to inspect. "Look at the price! Look at the price!" cried my father. "You couldn't find anything like this elsewhere for the price. I don't sell 'em. I'm giving 'em away. Look at this." "He must have stolen them," I heard the people say when they saw the prices. If they had glanced at my shamed looks, they would have known that they were right in their suppositions. If they did not notice me, Mattia did. "How much longer can you bear this?" he asked. I was silent. "Let us go back to France," he urged again. "I feel that something is going to happen and going to happen soon. Don't you think sooner or later the police will get on to Driscoll, seeing how cheap he's selling the things? Then what will happen?" "Oh, Mattia, if you will keep your eyes shut, I must keep mine open. We shall both be arrested and we haven't done anything. But how can we prove that? Aren't we eating the food that is paid for by the money that he gets for these things?" I had never thought of that. It struck me now like a blow in the face. "But we can earn our food," I stammered, trying to defend ourselves. "That's true, but we are living with thieves," replied Mattia, speaking more frankly than he had ever done before. "And then if we are sent to prison, we can't look for your family, and I'm anxious to see Mrs. Milligan to warn her against that James Milligan. You don't know what he might not do to Arthur. Let us go while we can." "Let me have a few more days to think it over, Mattia," I said. "Hurry up then. Jack, the giant killer, smelled flesh. I smelled danger." Circumstances did for me what I was afraid to do. Several weeks had passed since we left London. My father had set up his caravans in a town where the races were about to be held. As Mattia and I had nothing to do with selling the goods, we went to see the racecourse, which was at some distance from the town. Outside the English racecourses, there is usually a fair going on. Mountebanks of all descriptions, musicians, and stallholders gathered there 2 or 3 days in advance. We were passing by a campfire over which a kettle was hanging when we recognized our friend Bob, who had been with Mattia in the circus. He was delighted to see us again. He had come to the races with 2 friends and was going to give an exhibition of strength. He had engaged some musicians, but they had failed him at the last moment, and he was afraid that the performance the next day would be a failure. He had to have musicians to attract a crowd. Would we help him out? The profits would be divided between the 5 of us that made up the company. There would even be something for Capi, for he would like to have Capi perform his tricks in the intervals. We agreed and promised to be there the next day at the time he mentioned. When I told of his arrangement to my father, he said that he wanted Capi and he could not give him. I wondered if they were going to make my dog to do same dirty trick. From my look, my father guessed my thoughts. "Oh, it's all right," he said. "Capi's a good watchdog. He must stand by the caravans. In a crowd like we should have, we might easily be robbed. You two go alone and play with your friend Bob, and if you are not finished until late, which will be quite likely, you can join us at the Old Walk Tavern. We shall go on our way again tomorrow." We had spent the night before at the Old Walk Tavern, which was a mile out on a lonely road. The place was kept by a couple whose appearance did not inspire one with confidence. It was quite easy to find this place. It was on a straight road. The only annoying thing was that it was a long walk for us after a tiring day. But when my father said a thing, I had to obey. I promised to be at the tavern. The next day, after tying Capi to the caravan where he was to be on guard, I hurried off to the racecourse with Mattia. We began to play as soon as we arrived and kept it up until night. My fingers ached as thought they had been pricked with 1,000 pins, and poor Mattia had blown his cornet so long that he could scarcely breathe. It was past midnight. Just as they were doing their last turn, a big bar of iron which they were using in their feats fell on Mattia's foot. I thought that his foot was broken. Fortunately, it was only severely bruised. No bones were broken, but still he could not walk. It was decided that he should stay there that night with Bob, and I should go on alone to the Old Walk Tavern, for I had known where the Driscoll family was going to the next day. All was dark when I reached the tavern. I looked around the caravans. They were nowhere to be seen. All I could see, besides 1 or 2 miserable wagons, was a big cage from which, as I drew near, came the cry of a wild beast. The beautiful gauzy-colored caravans belonging to the Driscoll family were gone. I knocked at the tavern door. The landlord opened it and turned the light from his lantern full on my face. He recognized me, but instead of letting me go in, he told me to hurry after my parents, who had gone to Louis, and said that I'd better not lose any time joining them. Then he shut the door in my face. Since I had been in England, I had learned to speak English fairly well. I understood clearly what he said, but I had not the slightest idea where Louis was situated, and besides, I could not go, even if I found out the direction, and leave Mattia behind. I began my weary tramp back to the racecourse an hour later. I was sleeping beside Mattia in Bob's wagon. The next morning, Bob told me how to get to Lewis, and I was ready to start. I was watching him boil the water for breakfast when I looked up from the fire and saw Cappy being led towards us by a policeman. What did it mean? The moment Cappy recognized me, he gave a tug at his leash and, escaping from the officer, bounded towards me and jumped into my arms. "Is that your dog?" asked the policeman. "Yes." "Then come with me. You are under arrest." He seized me by the collar. "What do you mean by arresting him?" said Bob, jumping up from the fire. "Are you his brother?" "No, his friend." "Well, a man and a boy robbed St. George Church last night. They got up a ladder and went through the window. This dog was there to give the alarm. They were surprised in the act, and in their hurry to get out of by the window, the dog was left in the church. I knew that with the dog I'd be sure to find the thieves. Here's one now. Where's his father?" I could not utter a word. Mattia, who had heard the talk, came out of the caravan and leaned over to me. Bob was telling the policeman that I could not be guilty because I had stayed with him until 1 o'clock. Then I went to the Old Oak Tavern and spoke to the landlord there, and came back here at once. It was a quarter after 1 that the church was entered, said the officer, "and this boy left here at 1 o'clock, so he could have met the other and got to the church." "It takes more than a quarter of an hour to go from here to the town," said Bob. "On the run, no," replied the policeman. "And what proves that he left here at 1 o'clock?" "I can prove it, I swear it," said Bob. The policeman shrugged his shoulders. "This boy can explain to the magistrate," he said. As I was being led away, Mattia threw his arms about my neck as it was because he wanted to embrace me, but Mattia had another object. "Keep up your courage," he whispered. "We won't forsake you." "Take care of Capi," I said in French, but the officer understood. "Oh, no," he said. "I'll keep that dog. He helped me to find you. He may help me to find the other." Handcuffed to the policeman, I had to pass under the gaze of a crowd of people, but they did not jeer me like the peasants in France had done at my first arrest. These people, almost all of them, were antagonistic to the police. They were gypsies, tramps, in fact, the bohemian vagabond. There were no onions strewn over this prison where I was now locked up. This was a real jail with iron bars at the windows, the sight of which put all thought of escape from my mind. In the cell there was only a bench and a hammock. I dropped onto the bench and remained for a long time with my head buried in my hands. Mattia and Bob, even with the help of other friends, could never get me away from here. I got up and went over the window. The bars were strong and close together. The walls were 3 feet thick. The ground beneath was paved with large stones. The door was covered with a plate of sheet iron. And no, I could not escape. I began to wonder if it would be possible for me to prove my innocence despite Capi's presence in the church. Mattia and Bob could help me by proving an alibi. If they could prove this, I was saved in spite of the mute testimony that my poor dog had carried against me. I asked the jailer when he brought in some food if it would be long before I should appear before the magistrate. I did not know then that in England you are taken into court the day after arrest. The jailer, who seemed a kindly sort of man, told me that it would certainly be the next day. I had heard tales of prisoners finding messages from their friends in the food that was brought in to them. I could not touch my food, but I at once began to crumble my bread. I found nothing inside. There were some potatoes also. I mashed them to a pulp, but I found not the tiniest note. I did not sleep that night. The next morning the jailer came into my cell carrying a jug of water and a basin. He told me to wash myself if I wished to, for I was to appear before the judge, and a good appearance never went against one. When the jailer returned, he told me to follow him. We went down several passages, then came to a small door which he opened. "Pass in," he said. The room I entered was very close. I heard a confused murmur of voice, although my temples were throbbing and I could scarcely stand. I was able to take in my surroundings. The room was of fair size, with large windows and high ceiling. The judge was seated on a raised platform. Beneath him, in front, sat 3 other court officials. Near where I stood was a gentleman wearing a robe and wig. I was surprised to find that this was my lawyer. How was it I had an attorney? Where did he came from? Amongst the witnesses, I saw Bob and his 2 friends, the landlord of the Old Walk Tavern, and some men who I did not know. Then, on other stand-up side, among several other persons, I saw the policeman who had arrested me. The public prosecutor, in a few words, stated the crime. A robbery had been committed in St. George's Church. The thieves, a man and a child, had climbed up a ladder and broken a window to get in. They had with them a dog to give the alarm. At a quarter after 1, a late pedestrian had seen a light in the church and had at once aroused the sexton. Several men ran to the church. The dog barked and the thieves escaped through the window, leaving the dog behind them. The dog's intelligence was remarkable. The next morning the animal had led the policeman to the racecourse, where he had recognized his master, who was none other than the accused now standing in the prisoner's dock. As the second thief, they were on his trail, and they hoped to arrest him shortly. There was little to be said for me. My friends tried to prove an alibi, but the prosecutor said that I had ample time to meet my accomplice at the church and then run to the Old Walk Tavern after. I was asked then how I could account for my dog being in the church at a quarter after 1. I replied that I could not say, for the dog had not been with me all day, but I declared that I was innocent. My attorney tried to prove that my dog had wandered into the church during the day and had been locked in when the sexton closed the door. He did his best for me, but the defense was weak. The judge said that I should be taken to the county jail to wait for the grand jury to decide if I should or should not be held for the assizes. The assizes? I fell back on my bench. Oh, why had I not listened to Mattia?